Well, hi everyone, and welcome once again to Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, going well, Aaron. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Well, as we know, we've just recently crossed a financial year, and much of the talk is, of course, all the Div 296s and all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to the fund's annual compliance obligations, one of the key areas that we must be conscious of is the requirements within a fund's investment strategy. And in particular, the requirements to ensure that we have established an investment strategy as part of, in essence, that early phase of setting up the fund. But then we have our requirements to reviewing the strategy. And year end is a perfect opportunity to do that. So, Tim, can I get you to maybe elaborate on that a little bit and then some of the other considerations whereby an investment strategy review would be appropriate?
Yeah, so look, it ultimately comes down to our obligations as trustees. So I'll put my trustee hat on at the moment, and it comes down to our obligation as trustees under the SIS Act. Whereas, historically we had a covenant, which is kind of a guiding principle to create an investment strategy for a fund, but we never really had anything that I shouldn't use the word punish, but there was nothing really to make you accountable or hold you accountable for the way that the investment strategy was written until the regulations changed. And I'm going to say, let's say over 10 years ago. And when those regulations changed, one of the key things was they made it an operating standard and subsequently via the regulations to have this requirement where not only do we have to formulate the investment strategy, but we had to regularly review it. And so therefore it went from being effectively just a paper-based obligation that funds satisfied to a meaningful document where you effectively had to measure yourself to make sure, one, that your objectives were still aligned with where you wanted to take the fund from a I guess a future benefit payment position or current benefit payment position for pensioners. But it really sort of made you more accountable as to whether or not the thought processes behind the way the fund was investing were going to meet the fund's objectives. And so it really put that onus on trustees without getting too carried away with, regularly review means every month or whatever, giving a little bit of flexibility to trustees to say, look, you should be looking at this document annually at the very least, but there are going to be a whole set of other circumstances where you should really be reviewing how the fund is investing and why it's investing that way.
Yeah, so from a compliance point of view, that regulation 409 then formulates part of the auditor's obligation. So
Yep.
to ensure that we have an investment strategy and ultimately we're operating in accordance with that fund's investment strategy. So I think it's important to always remember the auditor's role is not there to tell you what is good and bad,
Yep.
but it's to ensure that you are upholding what the operating standard requires the trustee to ultimately do. And part of that upholding is that there is a regular review function built into it, like we've seen over time in 2014, where we saw the introduction of insurance considerations as part of
Yep.
that journey as well.
Yeah, and look, to be fair in regards to the whole thing, all trustees every year sign their annual trustee minute. Well, I mean, particularly if they use one of the standard accounting platforms,
Yeah.
it'll produce financial statements that'll have a trustee minute. That trustee minute will make some line or make some commentary around, that the trustees have reviewed their investment strategy. And so then the auditor is ultimately taking that one step further and often, whether it's a spot check or whatever it might be, or they might have a copy of the most recent strategy on file for a fund and it might be 5, 6, 7 years old. And so they're just doing their due diligence to follow through to make sure that trustees are in fact, reviewing that document. And I can speak sort of close to home here. This year when I finished the 23-24 financial year for my own fund, I went through separation 5, 6 years ago. And so the auditors they posed the question to me, have you updated your investment strategy or have you reviewed your investment strategy given you've gone from a 2-member fund to a 1-member fund? Has it changed the investment outlook for the fund? And so that was a really good prompt. I took that as a positive piece of engagement from the auditor.
Yeah, and that I guess triggers the next part of this. So there's a regular review function which the ATO openly acknowledges that it should be done at least annually, right? So
Yep.
we got to tick that box. But there will be events that occur within SMSFs, and you spoke about a separation in that instance and a departure of a member. But equally, it's going to be impacted where we're bringing members into the fund as well. So change in membership is another trigger that the ATO indicates, well, you would expect to see some sort of review in the decisions around and the operation of that fund, which would reflect, formulating a review to the investment strategy at that point in time.
Yeah, and it's just one of many of those review opportunities. And so, yeah, adding a member, removing a member are two significant ones. But then, obviously, a change in the member's circumstances. So, when we move from that position of accumulating benefits to looking to pay benefits out, then we're going to look at a review of the investment strategy because we might need greater liquidity to ensure that we can fund the pension liabilities. And you and I have done a lot of work recently on legacy pensions, where there was a real requirement for a lot of those pensions to have to operate in accordance with their investment strategy from a growth and performance point of view to meet actuarial requirements. And now with a lot of those funds sort of winding back on those pensions, do they go through the process now reviewing their strategy because they now have the chance to reflect and change the way that they've invested previously?
Yeah. So I guess, Tim, in wrapping this up, the question then becomes, well, if we get to the end of the year and we see a situation whereby the auditor raises this issue of an investment strategy, it isn't currently compliant. I guess what happens from there, and what do trustees need to do? Because ultimately, again, it's not the auditor's responsibility to be saying you can't invest in this or you can't do that. But if they have ranges, and I know there's a lot of debate whether you should have ranges and shouldn't have ranges, and auditors will have their views around that. But we just ultimately need to ensure that we kind of correct our action and then move forward.
Yeah, and look, the best thing about a non-compliant investment strategy is it can be compliant within a minute,
Yeah.
because all you do is change it. And so you either change your investment patterns or you change the strategy. So it's really about the document reflecting the behaviours of the trustees with that objective of what are the goals of the fund. So I mean, clearly, if you've got investments that aren't meeting the objectives because they're speculative or whatever, or non-income, non-growth type investments, then auditors are quite within the right to say, hang on, what is the purpose of this investment? But then back on the trustees, it's that capacity to justify. And if you can't justify, change, and change is relatively simple in the administrative area.
Yeah, and I think from that point of view, the ATO, a lot of people see the investment strategy as just simply a tick and flick compliance document. There's definitely a psychology of trying to change that view, and obviously financial advisors take a very different view to maybe an auditor that's doing it. But as a trustee, you have a responsibility to meet the requirements of Reg 409, and that requirement around investment strategy is for trustees of super funds, right? So it has broader application than SMSFs, and when you drill into APRA guidance around what RSC trustees are responsibility for, well, you can actually start to pull out and learn some lessons about what trustee expectation is from a prudential point of view, even though SMSFs are not prudentially regulated. But it gives you some real insight into why the ATO say what they do when it comes to the literature and expectations, because it is about setting objectives for retirement. It is about trying to ensure that all the checks and balances that need to be done along the way, cash flow, inflows of contributions, making sure insurance is covered and all that sort of stuff, that they've actually been thought about. And that's really, as a regulator, what they want to do, to say, if you're going to run your own fund, you're going to look after your own money, just make sure that you've got a plan in place and you're pretty much following that plan throughout the life cycle that you have your fund.
Absolutely.
So thanks. Well, I'm glad you contributed to that. No. Well, this is naturally going to fall into the remit of our upcoming SMSF annual compliance masterclass. So our Cooper family and multiple funds mean we will have different investment strategy considerations. So you can find out more about that upcoming masterclass in August. You can visit our website, smartersmsf.com/events. Thanks again for your time, Tim.
Always a pleasure, Aaron.
And we look forward to seeing you for next week's edition of Feeling Smarter. Take care and bye for now.
Bye.